Hello, everyone. That's good, like this? Okay. So my name is Louise. I'm from Brussels. I study in the Brussels University and in La Cambre, which is an art school. And I wanted to start with just give you a little overview of my background because I feel like it's important. So I studied art. I'm an artist and I'm doing a PhD in what we call in Belgium art and science of the art. So it means that in my PhD, I have a artistic research practice uh, and a more theoretical research practice, which is more like a classic PhD, let's say. So these are pictures of my work, my artwork. And if you want to learn more about it, you can go on my Instagram or my website because I'm not going to talk about it today. So that's why I just added some images so you have maybe an idea. And I'm mostly working on installation art and performances. So my PhD is about space imaginaries and narrative, and mostly how we can imagine and think a new relationship between the Earth and space through the study of alternative narratives of space. So the starting point of my research was this observation that interstellar travel and the idea of colonized space is still a very popular idea that it will kind of help mankind and solve our problem here on Earth. And this idea is, of course, not a new one, but it's been even more popular since, let's say, 10 to 15 years with the arrival of new private space agency that are using this idea to promote their activities. And on the other hand, you have those public space agency that are working and creating new space race through the moon and to Mars. And on the side, you have the Space Treaty that has been signed in 1967. And it's the only legal document that legiferates on how we can explore space. And so it legiferates on what space is and what we can do or not uh, in the cosmos. And in this document, it's seen that space is a common good for all mankind. So it's supposed to be for everyone here on this planet. But of course, this document, well, sadly, it's not sufficient anymore because it's, of course, not ethical. It doesn't take into account ecological question or the arrival of those private space agencies, but it's also not respected. Mainly, well, the first countries was the US, who signed the Space Act in 2015, and it allowed private companies to mine asteroid or celestial bodies to get those material and bring them back on Earth. Well, it's even if it's not possible technically yet, still it's kind of an open door to not respect the treaty. And lately, there's been the Artemis Agreement, which also allowed moon mining and the creation of what they call security zone on the moon. So kind of a way of private, create private area on the moon where other countries that are not part of the Artemis Agreement could not go anymore. So of course, it's also again the space treaty. Um, so this was the starting point of my research and this idea that for me, leaving Earth to go in an hospitable place as space is not a solution. And it also raises a lot of questions. The first one is, of course, where do we live and how do we go there in space? Why do we leave? What are the reasons? Are they really for helping mankind or to do businesses or for powerful reason. Um, but mostly it asks what and who do we leave behind, whether it's land or humans, non-humans, who decide who get to stay or to leave. And all those questions, to me, raises the idea that thinking Earth and space are totally linked today. So to kind of try to answer those questions and to understand how did we get there, I decided to study the narratives of space because it's my field of research, but also because narrative has helped us building our perception of space. So the first, so I'm going to give you an overview of my research because, well, I'm not finished yet, so that's why. But so the first chapter is about the historic of the representation of space, and the idea is to understand how artists played a very important role in the creation of our perception of the cosmos. And I'm working in the field of narratology, so the study of the narratives. And I'm working with the post-classical narratology. And this narratology places the receiver in the center of the creation of the narrative. So it's very much influenced by the cognitive science. And many studies have been conducted that show that, for example, when you are facing a real situation, like someone is walking, your brain activates the same part as when you are reading or watching a movie when someone is walking. So it means that one of the consequences of those studies is that narrative is a very performative act. So when you are immersing yourself in a fiction, your brain is using your imagination and your memory as a connective tool to think the narrative. And here, in the case of space, it's a way of imagining the unknown as well. And that's why narratives are so important in building our perception of space. So in this first chapter, I try to understand how artists and representation, science fiction as well, helped us to create those perception of space and how fiction and reality are connected in this field. And this also allowed me to discover that there was a very dominant narrative of space, which is, of course, a more Western vision that was creating around the 16th century and is very linked to this colonial vision that sees space as the new frontier and as a place to colonize and to conduct the same things that we did here on Earth. So these are few examples, very striking examples, I'd like to say, that show the resemblance and the link between what fiction can do in real life. So on the first, on the left, you have an illustration of a book from Jules Verne, Around the Moon, Autour de la Lune, from 1869. And on the right, you have pictures of the Earth landing of the Apollo 11 mission. So 100 years are separating those two images, but you can see that they are very linked and that they are, well, it's almost weird how they actually represent the same thing. These pictures as well. On the left, you have an illustration from Lucien Redot, which is a French illustrator and painters from those first painters and illustrators of space who create this Earth rising. So it's a view of space from the moon. And on the right, you have this Earth rise, this very famous pictures who was taken by the Apollo 8 crew in 1968. And it's very interesting to see how actually illustration and paintings influence our way of also imagining and thinking space, and how those pictures are actually very much influenced by how people from years before imagined how science exploration of space would be. And this one is it's also interesting to see how real and contemporary space actors are very much interesting in science fiction, and how they are using science fiction to create their own character and businesses. Here, of course, it's Elon Musk, and the character he creates, this very charismatic business leader, is very much influenced by those science fiction character from Blade Runner or Alien, and he's actually very aware of this, and his businesses are also very much influenced by those science fiction novels, such as The Hitchhikers, or also the culture cycle from Ian Banks, where, so for example, Neuralink from Elon Musk is almost the same as neural lace from Jan Banks that you can find in the culture cycle, so in the books. And what is interesting here is that those artists and authors are also aware that Musk is using their vision of space to create his society, but they're also very critique about it, because he's only using this because it's very striking and because everybody in the pop culture knows about it. So it's a good way to promote his vision of space. But for me, what is mostly interesting is to see and study those alternative narrative of space, contemporary narrative of space. And I divided those narrative into 3 types of category of narrative. So space exploration, alien or non-human life form from space, and how we can see the Earth as an exoplanet. So how can we explore Earth as a planet that's already in space? What is very interesting in studying what I call alternative narrative of space is because for many minorities, women, we saw it before, but also cultural, other, well, what's not Western vision of space, space is not accessible. So they need to imagine new ways of exploring the cosmos from Earth. And I wanted to share with you a few examples of those alternative narratives. So I wanted to start with this performance by an artist who's called Alexandra Mir, and it's called First Woman on the Moon. And so this performance took place in a beach in the Netherlands in 1999. And of course, it's a critique of the fact that, well, still today, there's been no woman on the moon. But the idea also behind this performance was that if someone would search on Google first woman on the moon, they would find those pictures. So it will also create some kind of trouble between what is real and what is fictional. And that's also how those narratives can actually get involved and in touch with reality. This is the same performance from the same artist, but it's kind of in a second times. She created the Moon Museum. So she collected all the garbage that she found on this beach while she was making all the craters to build the lunar surface. And it's also a way of thinking, well, all those artifacts could be from the moon, but it's also a critique because when astronauts went on the moon in the 60s, they left a lot of garbage there on the surface. So maybe those elements are, well, could be very important artwork and artifacts. Um, those pictures are from a collective that's called Black Quantum Futurism. That's an Afro-American artist, and they create the Black Space Agency. So they are very much linked to this movement that's called Afrofuturism, uh, which started in the 60s, and the movement Afrofuturism was about imagining new future for Afro-American, and those new future would probably happen in space because on Earth they had no, well, real space to create history and society for them. So space was kind of an utopian place where they wanted to go. And this kind of futurism movement now appears in very different place on Earth. So you have the Afrofuturism, but also the African futurism, Arab futurism, tropic futurism, and all those artists movements are based on the same idea, is to understand the past and the present to imagine new futures. So if you know where you come from, if you know your roots, the culture, the history of who you are and your community or your, yeah, you can also understand where the future would probably lead you, but where also you can lead the future in new perspective. So I think it's a very powerful way of also thinking how space could be if you can imagine it from those alternative point of view. So here they created the Black Space Agency, and it was a project that was mostly installation art, but also video, and it was about this Afro-American business person who created in the area of Philadelphia and a business to, well, he was working with NASA at the time, and but this story is totally forgotten today. But this idea of this guy was, okay, when the American would go on the moon, they would actually bring stuff with them that would be built by Afro-American people. So they would also have kind of role played in this exploration. And so this video is about the role played by those people in the space exploration, that a role that is totally forgotten today. This is a video that's called Astronaut from the African futurism movement. So it's a movement that's been created in the African continent, and it's how African people can imagine space and the future in space. So it's this video is about this young astronaut who's been chosen to go to the moon for the first time. So I would highly suggest you to watch it because it's a very powerful video, and it's very interesting because it imagined the past differently because this story happens in the 60s in the movie. So the idea is what would be our present if the first astronaut was a woman from the African continent. And this one is also a very powerful video from Larissa Sansour. It's called A Space Exodus, and it's from the Arab futurism movement. And here the idea is that Palestinian people could find a place and a territory where they could actually be free, maybe on the moon. And she uses very classical theme and representation of space. create her video. So, for example, she used the same sound as the movie from 2001 from Kubrick, but with a Arabic tone. So it's also a way of changing our classical perception and of space in a more situated area. I think it's the last one. So there are many, many examples of those alternative narratives of space, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview of these. And for me, I hope that those narratives, if they are shared and seen, could help us to imagine a new future and maybe will have an impact on our space imaginaries for the future. Thank you.
Same for the participants online. If you have any questions, can you just unmute yourself? Yes, if there are, if not, well, Louise stays with us the whole day, so you can continue talking also afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. And if we compare it to the previous one, the one from Hélène Foucault, who said that she saw kind of more and more freedom for the woman and that they are more and more affirmative. Do you see the same evolution, or are you beginning with at the point where she's coming? I don't know if you see what I'm saying. My question is, Hélène Foucault is saying that men are more and more the equal of men. They are more and more the same thing than men. And maybe my English is too poor, so I'm sorry, I don't want to say the same thing, but you see what I mean. And is it, do you live from the point where Hélène did arrive? It means that men and women, it's quite clear, are the equal, and now we turn to new or to other inequalities, like for instance, the color of the skin and all this intersectionality perspective, or do you still have the same question than Hélène? Do you see my question?
Well, I think we still have a lot of things to do, and that equality is not here yet. Those narrative I showed are, for me, a very small part of the fiction and the science fiction. They are very important to be shown, but yes, they're for me. It's they're still very not, yeah, equality.
Thank you. There are questions online, and then we give the floor. Yeah, Brad, I think you can unmute.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. We can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. So my question is kind of, it can be simple, but it may actually require some explanation. So I understand astrocolonialism as post-colonial and decolonial colonialism, which is to say its power matrix integrates colonization and differentiates itself from colonization in being a means of saving coloniality from the excesses and the problems of colonialism. And according to that definition, I would want to read a lot of the examples that you're providing as actually participating in this sort of astro-colonial logic as opposed to questioning it. And I'm wondering how you react to this question, which is to say, even if it's feminism or even if it's some outsider group, is this not also just the same colonial logic, perhaps tied to the idea of saving the future as maybe the core of coloniality as such?
I'll try to answer if I understand correctly. So you say that because those narratives also show people exploring and colonize space, they are reproducing kind of the same dominant perspective.
No, I'm saying that if you differentiate space colonialism from terrestrial global colonialism, that it automatically and differentiates itself from that logic within its own discourse. And the question is whether these discourses are not actually just part of the contemporary astrocolonialist discourse as opposed to being counter discourse.
Well, I think they're probably part of those discourse. I'm not sure I quite get the question, so I'm really sorry. But for me, there are narratives that are based and come from non-Western place. So obviously they bring out new ideas. And I think it's important to also listen to those voices that are, well, that tends to be put aside from our Western position.
And I mean, the question is, is how you understand your object, right? I mean, is it outside of the Western discourse, or is it in fact the contemporary shape of the Western discourse?
Yes, I have a question. Closer, like that? Better? Huh? Yes, but it's okay like that? Okay. Yes, I wanted to know if you think that the artists you've presented, is space the main subject for them, or is space a way to show other items very important for them as liberty, future, and space is used as a kind of space, of a room for dreams and illusion, or demands, social demands?
I think both, and I agree with you, but I think it's also the same in our Western perspective. I mean, space is kind of still unknown, so it's also a place to put a projection of the future, and we are actually doing the same in our Western society, and those alternative perspective of space just also well, their background also imagine space differently. So I think we can learn from them a lot to explore space differently.
Are these artists engaged for you?
Engage in space exploration?
In space exploration, or engaged in social items?
In social items, yes, but I mean, it's obvious that space exploration, as we are talking about today, is mainly done by Western countries, and that they actually don't have any way to go into space, so they have to imagine new ways and ways to explore space, but from an earthly perspective, I think.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a question. I hope it will be like concrete and clear question related to social and economic status, because you focused, it is my feeling, more on gender and race. I mean, not you, but artists are mainly focused on race and gender. And of course, they are very, very important. But if I would say what is my vision, the dark vision of the effect of space exploration, I would say that, for example, Mars or moon or anywhere else, it will be like a place for poorest masses, like living in a blocks and like, for example, ghettos and something like this. And Earth will be like green oasis just for the richest people, like that can use the resources and something like this. So my question is, do you feel that this kind of characteristics like social and economic status is important now in art that is like deconstructing the imaginaries of future spaces? Because if not, then maybe we will just wake up in a one way in a world that the whole thing that we try to do, so make space for all and just educate people to be more engaged and involved in space education and so on. Maybe we are just building the world that is the world of capitalistic like visions and the most powerful and the richest man, like Musk, who is now like involved in politics in state. So is it important in artistic visions, not only race and gender, which are, as I want to strongly stress that, are very important, but what about the status, like social and economic one?
Yes, they are very important. I cannot speak for all artists because I feel like each of them has their own perspective and their own imaginary and want to share something very specific. But yes, there are also many artists who are against space exploration and who want to land on Earth and to imagine new futures here on Earth and not only in space. But for the science fiction, for the futurism movement, space is, yes, as I said, mostly seen as a very wide place where you can imagine alternative, but it's also sometimes dystopian or a utopian perspective. So yes.
No, if there are another question, so
there is a very last question, and then we have to make a break. So Brad continues his questions about China. So what about China? About because you said about the Western countries, and what about China?
I can talk about an artist that's called Alexander Lek, and he created Sinofuturism, so Chinese futurism, and it's a video artist, and he did a video that's called Sinofuturism. So if you want to go check it out, and it imagined that China is already in the future, so space is not really much important anymore because China is already the future of the way they created their society based on a very ancient culture and very new technologies is kind of it's the future. So yeah, I think it's a very interesting way of seeing this and on the perspective of China.